forged in solitude, when no one's looking, when no one's cheering, and when no one's coming to save you. That's the raw truth. Real power is developed when you're alone, facing your demons without a safety net. Because when you're alone, you're forced to deal with reality, unfiltered, unforgiving, and completely yours to handle. Most people run from solitude. They treat it like a punishment. They panic the moment the room gets quiet. That's weak behavior. Solitude isn't punishment, it's a weapon. It's where the strongest version of yourself is born. When you're stripped of distractions, when no one is there to hold your hand, that's when you learn what you're truly made of. That's when you stop pretending, stop performing, and start confronting the flaws you've been hiding behind noise and people. Pain hits differently in solitude. There's no one to blame, no one to cry to. You either crumble or get up, and that choice, the decision to stand up again without applause, is what separates the weak from the powerful. When you're alone, you learn to become your own motivation. You stop relying on external hype and start fueling yourself from the inside. You become dangerous, not in a reckless way, but in a controlled, unshakable way. Because no one can break you once you've built yourself in the dark. The gym at 5 a.m. alone, the late nights grinding when everyone else is sleeping, the silence of your room when you're fighting thoughts no one else knows about. That's the real training ground. That's where mental muscle is built. It's in those private moments that you gain the strength to walk into public like a warrior. The world only sees the outcome, but the foundation is poured in isolation. God doesn't isolate you because he's forgotten about you. He isolates you because he's preparing you. Preparation doesn't happen in crowds. It doesn't happen when you're surrounded by comfort. Comfort makes you soft. Comfort is the enemy of greatness. That's why solitude becomes necessary. God wants you alone so he can remove the noise, strip away the lies, and break you down to the truth. And once you're down there in that silence, you begin to rebuild, not as a fragile product of your environment, but as a refined, unshakable individual forged by discipline and fire. There's a reason why the strongest people you'll ever meet have walked through hell alone. They didn't have backup. They didn't have a cheer squad. They had their mindset, their grind, and their purpose. That's it. They walked alone until their strength became so undeniable, the world had no choice but to recognize it. But that recognition didn't create them. It came after the fire, after the nights of silence. After the battles fought behind closed doors. People think strength comes from being surrounded by others, from teams, friends, networks. That's not strength, that's support. And while support is nice, it's not required. What's required is resilience, and resilience doesn't come from comfort. It comes from pressure, pain, and perseverance. 3 things you face when you're completely, unapologetically alone. Noise is everywhere. Social media, group chats, constant opinions, mindless entertainment. Your mind is under attack every minute of the day, and it's not just noise from outside. It's also the noise within. Doubts, fears, comparisons, insecurities. That mental clutter blocks clarity. It drowns out the signal, and when you're surrounded by constant stimulation, don't expect to hear anything from God. Not because he's silent, but because you're too distracted to notice he's been speaking the whole time. God doesn't yell over the crowd. He doesn't compete with your phone, your playlist, or your gossip circle. He waits and he watches. He waits for you to cut the noise and create space, because that's when revelation comes. Not in the chaos, but in the quiet. But the problem is most people are addicted to noise. They use it to escape. The music, the scrolling, the background TV, the fake conversations. It's all a mask to avoid facing what's really going on inside. The world is loud on purpose. It wants your attention. It wants your energy. It wants your mind so consumed with nonsense that you forget you even have a purpose. That's strategic. Because the moment you actually slow down and sit in silence, the truth starts to rise. The truth about your life, your calling, your habits, your relationships, things you've buried under distractions because they're uncomfortable to face. But that's exactly what God wants to address, and He won't do it in the crowd. God speaks in stillness. That's why solitude is sacred. That's why quiet is powerful. You don't need more podcasts, more influencers, more opinions. You need clarity. You need alignment. And that only comes when you unplug from the noise and lock in spiritually. You can't keep asking for direction and then surround yourself with chaos 24/7. You won't hear Him that way. You're tuned to the wrong frequency. Sometimes the reason you feel lost isn't because God isn't guiding you. It's because you're tuned in to everyone but Him. You're chasing advice, looking for signs, waiting for someone to tell you what to do with your life. But you won't even give 5 minutes of silence to the one who actually knows the answer. You'll consult 10 people before you sit quietly and listen to God. That's backwards. Silence is uncomfortable because it exposes everything you've been suppressing. But that's the whole point. God brings you into quiet places to confront what you've been avoiding, not to shame you, but to align you, to sharpen your vision, to strengthen your conviction. He's not going to yell over your distractions. He wants your full attention, and He'll strip away whatever is necessary to get it. That's why some relationships fall apart. That's why some people ghost you. That's why certain opportunities shut down. It's not always an attack, it's a setup. A divine muting of everything around you so you can finally start tuning into the only voice that actually matters. Your energy is currency. It's not infinite. It's not replaceable. Every time you engage with someone, every time you give your attention, your effort, your time, you're spending it, and the harsh truth is not everyone deserves it. You're not here to fuel everyone. You're not here to be available for every call, every complaint, every draining conversation that leads nowhere. You weren't created to carry everyone else's mess while they keep living carelessly. That's how you get burned out, bitter, and disconnected from your own purpose. Some people come into your life not to build you up, but to bleed you dry. They see your drive, your focus, your consistency, and instead of being inspired, they latch on. Not to grow with you, but to benefit from your grind without matching your energy, and you let them because you think it's noble. You confuse loyalty with self-sacrifice, but giving access to the wrong people doesn't make you loyal. It makes you irresponsible with your gift. There are people who will drain you with drama, people who live in chaos and want you to live in it too, people who only call when they need something, people who want you to pour into them when you're already running on empty. And if you don't set boundaries, you'll become their emotional landfill. You'll carry their baggage, their insecurities, their failures. While yours sit unattended, that's not strength, that's self-neglect. You have to be selective, ruthless even, because the more focused you become, the more boundaries you need. Not everyone is qualified to be close to you. Not everyone can handle your ambition, your discipline, your transformation. Some people like the broken, distracted version of you because it made them feel better about their own lack of growth. The moment you start leveling up, their energy shifts, their support turns to jealousy. Their conversations become passive-aggressive. That's not love, that's exposure. God didn't give you strength so you could waste it convincing people of your worth. He didn't give you vision so you could constantly explain it to people who refuse to see. And He didn't build you up just so you could be the emotional crutch for people who have no intention of walking on their own. Your energy is meant to be invested, not drained. It's for your purpose, your mission, your calling, not for keeping toxic connections alive out of guilt or nostalgia. When you stop giving everyone access, you stop being used. You stop entertaining fake support. You stop dimming your light to make insecure people comfortable. It's not arrogance, it's awareness. It's protecting what you've worked for. Because while you're busy trying to fix everyone, your own progress stalls, your peace starts slipping, your clarity fades, and eventually you become resentful, not just of them, but of yourself for letting it happen. That's why access must be earned, not through words, but through alignment, consistency, and respect. If they don't bring value, they don't get access. If they don't grow with you, they don't go with you. In a world that thrives on validation, applause, and constant connection, isolation feels like punishment, but it's not. It's a mirror. It strips away the noise, the roles, the performance, and shows you exactly who you are. Not who people say you are, not who you pretend to be on social media, not who you try to become to fit in, just you, raw, exposed, and unfiltered. That's why it's uncomfortable. That's why most people run from it. Because when the masks come off, truth shows up, and most aren't ready to meet themselves. When you're isolated, distractions are removed. There's no one to impress, no audience to play to, no social script to follow. You're alone with your thoughts, your habits, your fears, and your truth. You start to notice what drives you, what drains you, what habits are helping you, and what patterns are keeping you stuck. You see the difference between who you've been pretending to be and who you actually are. It's not always pretty, but it's real, and that's where power begins. The identity you built in public often crumbles in private. You can project confidence, discipline, and success out there, but isolation exposes the cracks. It shows you where your foundation is weak. It shows you if your confidence is built on character or just attention. It shows you if your peace is internal or just a product of temporary comfort. Isolation doesn't lie. It doesn't flatter. It forces you to face the gap between your image and your identity. That's why God uses isolation as a tool, not as a punishment. He's not removing people from your life to hurt you. He's clearing the room so you can finally hear yourself think. So you can finally separate your voice from everyone else's. So you can ask the hard questions. Who am I without the title? Who am I without the relationship? Who am I when no one is watching? Those answers shape your future. Not the persona you crafted to be liked, but the identity you uncover when there's no one left to impress. Some people spend their entire lives running from themselves. They go from person to person, crowd to crowd, trend to trend, always moving, always talking, never pausing. Because the moment things get quiet, their truth starts knocking. But truth doesn't go away, it waits, and when life inevitably puts them in a season of isolation, it all surfaces. The fake confidence, the unresolved wounds, the emptiness behind the achievements, it all comes up. That's the moment of choice. Either face it and evolve or ignore it and repeat. When you lean into isolation, you don't just discover your flaws. You discover your power. You start to remember who you were before the world told you who to be. You reconnect with your core values, your calling, your standards. You realize how much of your energy was spent maintaining an identity that wasn't even yours. And in that quiet, you begin rebuilding, not based on trends or approval, but based on truth. The real you, the disciplined you, the self-aware, unshakable, purpose-driven version that can't be manipulated, distracted, or controlled. Everyone wants to elevate. Everyone talks about leveling up, becoming better, reaching new heights. But nobody wants the separation that comes with it. The truth is, you cannot rise while staying connected to everything and everyone that kept you grounded. Progress demands distance, not because you're better than people, but because what you're becoming requires space they can't handle. Elevation changes your atmosphere, your mindset, your habits, your circle, and not everyone is built to go where you're going. Separation isn't personal, it's strategic. It's not about ego, it's about alignment. When God starts to elevate you, He doesn't just hand you success. He starts by cutting attachments. He removes the distractions, the enablers, the comfort zones, and sometimes even the people you thought would be there forever. It feels like loss, but it's really preparation. You can't carry dead weight to the top. Some connections are too heavy. Some relationships drain too much of your mental energy. Some environments numb your ambition. And if you try to hold on to them, you slow down your own climb. There's a reason you feel the tension when you start growing. It's not just the grind, it's the pull between your old life and your future. The conversations that once felt normal now feel pointless. The people you used to vibe with now seem distant. That's not you being arrogant, that's your spirit recognizing misalignment. Elevation doesn't just upgrade your lifestyle, it upgrades your awareness. You start to notice what no longer fits, what no longer feeds you, and what no longer aligns with your vision. And the more you notice, the more you realize that separation isn't an option, it's a requirement. Some people are seasonal. They were assigned to the version of you that was still figuring it out. They were comfortable with your confusion, your inconsistency, your brokenness. But when clarity hits, when you start walking with purpose instead of passively existing, they get uncomfortable. They start questioning your change, your new standards, your drive. They say you've changed like it's a bad thing, but growth is change. Elevation is transformation, and not everyone will celebrate it. The higher you go, the thinner the air. That's not just physical, it's spiritual. Fewer people can survive the pressure, the responsibility, the self-discipline it takes to elevate. That's why you start feeling isolated the moment you commit to your next level. It's part of the process. Separation isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, gradual, calls stop coming, invitations slow down, the energy shifts, and it hurts, but it's necessary because what you're building requires clarity, focus, and endurance. You can't afford to be surrounded by confusion, comfort, or complacency. You don't elevate by staying available to everyone. You don't rise by remaining loyal to limitations. At some point, you have to choose, grow or stay connected to what keeps you average. You can't do both. The top isn't crowded because few are willing to separate. Not because they're not capable, but because they're not willing to let go. They want elevation without sacrifice. But the climb always demands that something stays behind. Purpose isn't glamorous. It's not a highlight reel, a social media caption, or a catchy slogan. It's pain, deep, personal, internal pain. Because before purpose ever becomes public, it has to be proven in private. You don't walk into your calling polished and perfect. You crawl into it broken, confused, doubting yourself while silently pushing forward. Everyone sees the moment you arrive. No one sees what it cost you to get there. That's because purpose is built in the dark. The early stages of purpose are lonely. Nobody claps. Nobody understands. You're grinding in silence, wondering if it's even working, wondering if you're crazy for believing in something no one else can see. That's how it works. Purpose doesn't show up with a clear map or a cheering section. It shows up disguised as rejection, isolation, setbacks, and pressure. It shows up when you're on your knees, frustrated, worn out, questioning why you were even given this fire in the first place. But that fire isn't there by accident. It's there to burn off everything that doesn't belong. Purpose is painful because it exposes everything that's not real, the relationships that aren't solid, the habits that aren't healthy. The identity you built to please people, all of it gets stripped because purpose doesn't work on false foundations. It's not built on hype. It's built on obedience, sacrifice, and resilience. Before you get the platform, you get the pruning. Before the stage, the silence, and that silence is brutal because in that space, you have to face who you are without applause, without affirmation, without anyone telling you you're doing great. That's why so few people ever walk fully in their purpose. Because they quit during the private phase, the dark phase, the hidden training ground where nothing looks like progress and everything feels like pressure. But that's the part that matters most. That's where the discipline is built. That's where you learn to show up without a reward, to be consistent when no one's watching, to hold the vision even when your reality doesn't match. It's not punishment, it's preparation. The public version of purpose, the one people admire, is just the fruit. But fruit only grows after the root takes hold, and the root grows underground, out of sight, unseen, uncelebrated. That's what makes it strong. That's what makes it stable. So when life hits and storms come, you don't fall apart. Because your foundation was built in the private battles nobody knows about. Purpose demands pain because pain sharpens your focus. It humbles you. It makes you pay attention. You stop wasting time. You stop chasing distractions. You start getting serious about what really matters, and that shift doesn't happen in comfort. It happens in the crushing, when your heart is heavy, when your plans fall apart, when you've got nothing left but faith. And even that feels like it's hanging by a thread. That's when purpose begins to take shape, not with fanfare but with fire, quiet, consuming fire that forces you to choose whether you're really built for this or just talking about it.